Wow, okay, hi guys. I am really excited. This video is completely sidetracked to what I was going to do for this week, but I wanted to share this with you. Okay, so we have a video coming up with all my favourite mixes from winter and scenes from winter, and that's taking a little while to put together. So every week I've been, or maybe every week or two, I've been watching like a kind of a presentation from either an art conservator, an art historian, or some type of scholar about maybe the way that Monet painted or Van Gogh, and it's really, really fascinating how when they look at painting in a academic way, they can actually teach us a lot about painting techniques. So I've been totally sidetracked and I want to kind of talk you through all of this today. Okay, so I've been thinking about some of the techniques the Impressionists used and thinking whether or not thinking about whether or not we can use those with watercolor. So yeah, that is kind of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to kind of show you the techniques and kind of how that differs in watercolor versus oil, and what are some of the limitations of watercolor in that respect, and see if we can overcome some of those things. One of the things that I love about the Impressionist paintings is kind of this kaleidoscope of colour that appears on the canvas. So you get these really scrumptious colour notes and, just all kinds of like colour coming together. So yeah, and when we'll look at a more in-depth example, but it's a little bit more, I think, difficult to achieve that in watercolor. We use glazing, but there's still always sort of a blending of color. So I'll show you an example here of what I mean. So in the top we're going to do watercolor. In the bottom box we'll do oils and kind of acrylics and things like that. It's all kind of works in a similar way. But so when we're applying watercolor, we put it down and it's kind of a wet wash. So we can work into that wet wash. We can add color. Like I'm just going to drop in some color here and a few different colors. So, like the way that the Impressionists would paint, they would be adding color wet into wet. And we'll look at that in the other medium. But when we apply color wet into wet in watercolor, there is a blending that takes place. So a lot of the colors kind of lose the crispness of their own kind of coloration. It kind of all becomes this kind of unified wash. Whereas when we blend with other mediums, so I'm actually using acrylic gouache here, you'll see a little later on, but it's working the same way as oils would. So you start applying wet into wet, and you can see here that the brush strokes will still retain some of that really nice kind of brushwork. You can still retain those colors, even though it's wet into wet. They're kind of holding their own form there within that painting. So you can kind of build up this lacework and framework of color in a different way. You can see what I mean there, but But this week I've been using the watercolor sticks and dipping those into my palette or to like colors in my palette. And you can actually, I'm kind of adding another step in the middle here with the watercolor to try and get some of those color notes and some of that kind of delineation of color to stay within the painting itself. So once this is dry, both with the watercolor and the oils or the other medium, then we come back in and we add the final layers. So like say this is kind of more like the side of a mountain. I'm thinking about one of Monet's paintings. You would come back in and you can glaze over the top. So there's different ways to glaze. You can also continue to do like wet washes, but for now, like we're going to kind of more do like this kind of wet on dry. You can also still add wet into wet. You can see you can add extra colors into what you have painted there on the surface, so you can continue to build the color in that way, but you will always kind of need to continue to building and like to kind of build the colors and then kind of like the final layer would be like dry brushing. So I was watching a presentation about Monet, and the last layer that he kind of puts on, he lets it all dry, and then he's kind of scumbling or dry brushing on a final layer of color, which I don't know, it was really interesting. So, and you'll see like in some of his paintings, he dry brushes on his name at the end. And in some of them, you'll see that his name is actually like signed wet into wet. So they know that the whole painting was done kind of in one sitting. So hopefully this is kind of making sense. What we're going to do are a few different examples to kind of look at these kind of concepts and maybe how we can use them in different ways. So I'm just putting down some petals here very quickly, and again I am picking up different colors. So this is watercolor, and I am trying to get some kind of different color notes into the petals here, but you'll see that there is always this kind of blending that takes place just because of the nature of the watercolor. But when I use a watercolor stick and then like I'm dipping into my half pans there, which are quite wet, you can see like there's quite a lot of water there, it picks up several different colors, and then when you actually apply it, similar to other mediums, it will hold onto those color notes and it starts to build up this framework of, it's not impasto in the way that other mediums are, although you can get a little bit. I kind of show you when we do the center of this flower, if your watercolor stick is quite wet and mushy, you can get a little bit of impasto with that. But yeah, it's just a really interesting kind of thing that using the watercolor this way, you can start to build up some of those almost textural color marks and build up the layers of the painting in this way. So you can see in this example, I had actually done a larger one of these, and this was kind of the first time I used the watercolor sticks, dipping them in and kind of using them to almost draw but paint, and found that I could kind of get these color notes to kind of sit where I placed them. They're not kind of moving and blending as much, and it was really exciting, and I felt like being able to do some kind of larger works and have those kind of brushstroke type things within the watercolor. So and then you can see here, like, this is how I normally will build up the colors. So once everything's dry, I'll come back in with a fine detail brush, and then I guess this is a very, kind of regular watercolor practice, but I feel like I've watched this a lot from botanical artists. So you come back in and kind of you're dry brushing or kind of working back into the painting and kind of adding detail and adding those layers in this way. But yeah, being able to have this kind of extra middle step where you can kind of get these really juicy kind of, well, they're not brush marks, but they're kind of these color marks. I just find it really exciting. So I wanted to share this with you and kind of paint a few things with you like this and kind of show you maybe some of the different things that it can do. And this really all started with these dahlias from, I think it was the last haul last year, and we did a couple of dahlias in that video to kind of look at the watercolor sticks. But I kept kind of thinking about them, and I wanted to have another go of them. And yeah, this kind of whole thing, so you can see them here, and this kind of whole thing just happened from from just trying these things. So this is why I'm always saying, like, just play, experiment. The other thing I think that would work really nicely with this, so if you don't have watercolor sticks, first of all, I just recommend getting maybe one or two. I've only been using really the buff titanium and the pearl white ones are the ones I've been using the most. But also neo colors I think would work really nicely with this technique as well. For some reason, when you pick up enough of the watercolor like that, it's not kind of just blending out as smoothly, which is just really nice, I think, for getting kind of extra bits of marks in there. So I also wanted to practice it, or kind of test it out on top of pastels, and this is actually the first time that I started filming for this video. So everything you've seen up until now I filmed actually at the end, and I was thinking of maybe just filming a little bit of this and then kind of putting it in with the next video we're going to do, but I realized this needed its whole own video. But yeah, one of the things that I was interested about learning about Monet is that he did often use pastels and wet the pastels, so they can tell that from kind of looking at the paintings and analysing the paintings. So again, like, I find it just so interesting that scholars can actually help us to figure out like how they were painting, which is just so nice. So this was the first time I was kind of doing it the next morning after I had done the kind of pink frame. And when I was doing the pink frame, I had just mixed a lot of colours to kind of paint the dahlias. So it was all wet. My palette was really quite wet with quite a lot of paint. So I'm realising now when I was picking this up in the morning, it wasn't kind of wet enough. I couldn't actually get enough on the stick here. So you do have to kind of, wet it and dip it and wet it and dip it. But yeah, it's just, it's such a nice way to kind of really get the, I don't know, I've always found it a little bit of a limitation using watercolor to kind of be able to use color expressively in the way that like oil painters do and things. And so I just found this so exciting and yeah, really, really nice to work with. Okay, so again, I was just going to leave it there, and then I thought, no, let's kind of pencil in a tree and kind of a landscape and continue to kind of work this and see kind of where we could take it. So, yep, I've kind of let this all dry, and again, like you can see how like we're starting to get some of those nice colour delineations and kind of framework of different colours building up there. So then I start the tree, and if you're in the landscape class, we do a tree fairly similar to this. So I'm doing this in that kind of a similar way, and I'm starting with just picking up different colours here. You could see there again, like I'm picking up different browns, but you can see kind of this blending that takes place, which again, it's a good thing, and I don't know, it's nice to have options. I think the way to use things. So you can see here, like I'm also leaving anyway, we'll talk about the tree in a minute, but you can see here, like I'm thinking about what colors might be in the rest of the landscape, and I'm just picking up some of those and applying those directly in the trunk, kind of the similar way that the Impressionists would. They've got, colours that kind of carry through the whole painting, and it's quite nice to kind of look at their paintings and see so the tree is not necessarily just brown. There are other flecks and reflections of colour from the landscape around that kind of come into the trees or the bark and things like that. So yep, you can see here I have switched to, this is the piemontite, I think, piemontite. This and so I've switched to like this kind of deeper brown to get some of this bark happening in the tree there. And then again, I am using like a fine detail brush. This is how I would normally build up the colour, and kind of doing dry brushing once that's all dry. And this, also works really nicely, but I just feel like it's not quite as juicy as the watercolor sticks. It's still quite refined, and it's a nice way to build up the painting. But yeah, I just really like the kind of the thickness of the color with the watercolor sticks. So you can kind of see the differences there. I've added some indigos, some of the like mint greens, some of the kind of sky blues, and also at the top of the tree I'm leaving that lighter. So you'll see kind of as the painting goes on, I want the detail in the tree and kind of the strongest contrast to be at the bottom of the trunk, so that we're not kind of looking up and out of the painting, we're kind of staying around the trunk, and then those long branches are kind of leading your eye back over to the emblem. So yeah, then I've put in this little umbrella to kind of have a picnic out in the landscape. And again, so I've just put watercolor in so far, and then I'm taking the watercolor sticks and again being able to apply these more kind of layers of color that kind of will more stay where you put them, so you get less of this kind of smooth blended look. I think that the blending is one of the beauties of watercolor, but I sometimes I do want to like go out and paint and not necessarily take oils. I like watercolor because it's quick and it's easy to use, but I still kind of want some of that really lovely, you can see here like just the pencil marks, really simple pencil marks underneath the bushes. And it was interesting, in one of Van Gogh's paintings you could see like the charcoal marks underneath where he's just where he's drawn his thing. So I just think it's really nice to kind of see the process of the artist. And so sometimes I feel like we could feel like, did we draw the pencil lines too dark, or did we do this or this? And when you're kind of looking back through their paintings, it's not necessarily all perfection. One of Van Gogh's paintings, he said he really made a mess of it and he really didn't like it. He had continued to work the kind of the bushes in the landscape, and the colours were kind of getting muddier and muddier. But it's just such a beautiful painting, so he couldn't really see it wasn't exactly what he had in mind, but like we can appreciate the beauty in it. So yeah, I think sometimes we are a little bit harder on ourselves, is what I'm trying to say, than it possibly is. But so the next thing that I am showing you here, so I've got this acrylic gouache from I think this is a Swedish company, or maybe a Swiss company, but this is really a beautiful product. So I'll show you a few ways that I have been using this, and this is kind of new territory for me. I've just put everything out here on this cotton piece of paper. I've been using that as a palette, and you can see here, I started this painting. I wasn't going to film, and then I thought, oh, this might be nice to just film a few parts of it. So and you can see here the purple had kind of run, so I just got this large brush and kind of watered. It was just kind of a watery drip of the purple, so I just put that down in the sky there. I'm holding this kind of palette, makeshift palette, on a sketchbook there, so it's quite firm. And I'm just kind of mixing colours as I would, and going back in, and I'm just kind of thinking my way through this different framework of colours, kind of how that all works, how to kind of put colour down on different areas, how to kind of mix in kind of different mediums. It does kind of feel a little bit different when you're using something different. It kind of blends differently. Okay, so you could see while I was waiting for this layer to dry, I did another background just on a different piece of paper. And then I've come back in and I am working on that technique where you're kind of dry brushing colour on top of what's already there on the page. So one of the things that was interesting about doing this, I'd actually just seen a painting by Klimt, the Island of Odyssey, something like that, and I was thinking about his water, but so I just was kind of quickly mixing this and quickly doing it, but I wasn't happy with the kind of the colour of the water here. Is quite muddy. Anyway, just things to kind of think about. And but like I'm painting kind of a lake kind of area that we have locally, and it's got kind of mountains on two sides and kind of distant mountains behind, and you can kind of, it's a good idea to kind of use something that you're familiar with or some kind of a simple motive that you're used to painting to kind of try new things like this, like experiment with different things. It was also nice to see that with this, like you've got the more thicker coverage, but you can also get the really nice transparent layers as well, which I am kind of used to and I really do enjoy working with. So just quite interesting. I'll show you a couple of other tips here as well. So this is the palette that I had on hand and that I have been using. So this is it says glass, but it's actually just kind of plastic, but it's just a nice large palette. Although I think I'm gonna swap it out for an airtight gouache one. But yeah, so I just tore up the paper that these were all on and they could fit in here. And what I've been doing is spraying them and then just leaving them. And you can see here they are still really fresh. You can see like the colour is kind of bleeding out onto the cotton paper. The reason that I've got them on the cotton paper is because it will stay wet, and so that actually helps to keep the paints wet as well from drying out. And so I'm using this Escoda Natural Hog Bristle, and you can see here how when I'm loading up the brush, I've got different colours kind of all around the brush, and then when I'm scumbling that colour on, I'm kind of twirling the brush, and so it gives you kind of a different you're getting kind of this kaleidoscope of colours happening naturally. Okay, so the next day I just did a colour chart and just kind of looking at, again, blending and mixing some of these colours. It is interesting when you get kind of new colours. Some might be more transparent, some are more opaque, and so you do kind of have to think about that and look at, like, even if you know colour mixing, it's still really important to kind of learn the new properties of the new medium. So anyway, I was just looking at that, and then I've also been really thinking about pointillism and kind of, so basically it's when they're using kind of dots of colour, but they're putting complementary colours next to each other to kind of let your eye assemble those colours. So I've been thinking about that and just kind of the idea of using the dot painting. So in Australia we have the Aboriginal painting, which features that really heavily, and it's quite beautiful. So I have been just kind of thinking about it. You can see here that I'm taking colours, again, like this was the next day, and you can see how fresh the paints still look. So just giving them a nice like squirt with water, and then just making sure the palette's closed. I think this would work even better with an airtight palette. This one's not, but yep. And so I'm just mixing colours. So I'm pre-mixing all these colours, and then we're going to use these to do just one last artwork here. So one of the things that I keep forgetting to do, because I'm not used to this medium, is to put down some sort of ground or kind of block-in colours. So I'm used to working from the white of the paper to the darkest shadow, and then I keep realising, I need to kind of fill the page with some colour. So again, I just went back in and picked up some really light colour here and kind of did a watercolour wash in the sky. Okay, so I kind of had this layer down, then while this was drying, and I wasn't exactly sure how to approach this, so I thought I'll let that dry and then we will do some kind of dots of colour on top of it. So while that was drying, I took one of the watercolour sticks and I'm just loading up the bottom of the stick here that's still kind of quite nice and round, and just creating these kind of larger dots of colour around the outside of the painting here. And so then I think I was still kind of waiting for the painting to dry, so then I just started to kind of build up sort of, instead of, I'm sort of going with a blue and orange, or kind of blue and, it kind of ends up being kind of lavender and burnt sienna-ish type colour here. But what I did find when I was doing this is I wasn't that eager to just paint with dots. So that's kind of interesting. It's like, it's nice to try different things, because that's the beauty of art, is that we all like, to express ourselves in different ways, and that's what becomes personal to your style, is kind of the different way that you enjoy doing things. So anyway, I hope this was interesting. And the next actual video will be out soon, but don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because sometimes, like today, it could be a Monday at lunchtime that the video arrives. So I hope you're doing well, and I will see you soon. Bye.